Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live stream. It's fantastic. So many people are already here in the chat, which is fantastic. Loads of questions coming in with a lot of the big new news, of course, breaking, which I'll get into shortly. First of all, if you're here, remember that the whole content is driven by the questions that you leave in the comments over there. If you're watching this afterwards, many of you do, as I say every week, thanks very much for watching it afterwards. Remember, you can just flick forward with all the different questions coming. You don't have to, flick away or not do it. I just realized that my actual iPad, which I keep as a backup there, is merrily making sounds as well. So at least I know it's working. Let me introduce myself, although I think probably most of you know who I am. I'm Gary Bembridge. The channel is Tips for Travelers. The goal of the channel is to help make it fun, make it easier to discover, find, and enjoy those unforgettable cruise vacations that we're all dreaming of. So what I'm going to do today is I thought I would start, and there's questions coming in anyway, about some of the big changes coming up for cruising, because things are now starting to move incredibly fast, really, really fast, particularly across in the United States after a long period of kind of inaction, as it were. So I'm going to touch a little bit on that. Just to remind you two things actually before we start, is those of you who are familiar with Sean and Steph, of course, very well-established travel vloggers. As you know, Sean unfortunately passed away of pancreatic cancer earlier this year. He was in his early 40s. Just this afternoon, there was a memorial which was live streamed to him, and I'll put a link down in the show notes after this if you do want to go and watch that, where there's lots of little video clips of the things they got up to, and some very nice and moving little statements from various friends and bloggers from around the world. So if you are fans of Sean and Steph, I will leave that in afterwards. MSC Virtuoso, of course, has started sailing in the UK. It started on Thursday for its first 4-night maiden voyage, and that so far is going pretty well. They're having pretty lousy weather. The UK is having terrible weather at the moment. Sorry, I was looking outside my window in case you wonder what I was doing. And so that's where it's going. Those who are following people, you see they're having a great time, even though the weather's not great. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are developing, and I'll pop in one of the questions. Steve, please explain the latest Alaska news. What cruise line would you recommend? Could there be more departure ports than Seattle? It's a bit of a pickled whatever. So basically, let me update you. I've actually got some notes here to make sure that I get it all down. So one of the most remarkable things that's happened, and I certainly was skeptic about it ever happening, was both the Senate and the House of Representatives in the US have passed a waiver on the Passenger Vessels Services Act, which means that ships are going to be allowed to call directly from a US port to Alaska without having to go to a foreign country. The bill that was put forward and championed by the Alaska representatives in both those houses is basically saying that this is for this year. And I'm going to come back to a question that Heather was asking us a little bit later about what does it mean moving forwards. So ships are able to sail to, ships are able to sail to Alaska straight out of a US port. So what's happened? Well, now that's to become law, still has to be signed by President Biden. There's no, view that he won't sign it. I think people are pretty confident that he will do. So what we've seen now is, as I've counted at the moment, and it might change, is 6 cruise lines have confirmed that they plan to start sailing mostly more towards the end of July for the rest of the Alaska season. So those that have confirmed are as follows. And what's really important, of course, is this is subject to final CDC approval. And the CDC, which I'll come on to, have made a lot of progress on what they're planning to do. So what we've seen so far, and this is all out of Seattle, going to Alaska, mostly 7-night trips. So we've seen Carnival Miracle going. What's really important about Carnival is earlier, we spoke about it, I think last week, is Ms. Duffy, who is the CEO of Carnival, had basically said on, I think it was NBC or one of the morning shows on television in the US, that they were unlikely to require vaccines. Carnival are acquiring vaccines for all passengers on their Alaska sailings. We're seeing Royal Caribbean have 2 ships, which are going to be Ovation and Serenade. Celebrity are going to be going with Celebrity Summit. And I think I saw somebody else ask a question about what's happening with Summit. Celebrity Summit is going to be doing Alaska cruises Holland America doing New Amsterdam, which is what I actually did when I went to Alaska the other year. Princess are using Majestic Princess, which is actually the ship I'm going to be going on next year to Alaska. And I did see, but I was trying to confirm it, Norwegian with Norwegian Bliss. So Norwegian also planning to do some cruises as well. So this is pretty big news and pretty, in some ways surprising, but very encouraging. So a lot of those cruises are now on sale. Again, as I've always said, with cruises coming back and when cruises resume, that they are always likely to be new cruises. Now, this is another example working around the various rules. Will more cruise lines be selling? Will more ships come on? That is possible. I did see some, for example, we saw Majestic Princess, all their crew were vaccinated yesterday in Los Angeles. So they're all getting all the crew vaccinated. And all of these cruises, you have to have had both doses of your vaccine. Now, of course, in the US, that's quite opens it to a lot of people because it's possible now to get kids of over 12 vaccinated. So Royal Caribbean, for example, came out this week and stressed the point that even everyone over 12 would need to be vaccinated. At the same time this was happening, we saw a couple of other things happening. We saw Royal Caribbean cancel all their cruises out of Bermuda, and they claimed it was because people didn't want to travel. I mean, I guess what they were saying is they weren't really selling. We've seen Crystal increase their number of cruises out of the Bahamas. We've seen Carnival suggest that they're going to hope to sell in July with Horizon out of Miami and Vista and Breeze out of Galveston. But that we don't really know entirely. But big news, the Alaska waiver for the passenger vessel services has been approved. We're just waiting for final okay from the CDC. I think people are pretty optimistic on the CDC. CDC is making those noises. And also, of course, bear in mind the CDC had spoken around 98% of guests vaccinated, 98% of crew vaccinated, 95% of passengers vaccinated were a way of skipping test cruises. So I think it's looking pretty powerful. Also, I did see a report from Seatrade News that the CDC are also looking at another of their rulings around 7-night cruises. And there's strong indications that they are likely to lift that ban on 7-night cruises. It's not final yet. So, you know, a lot of stuff happening across in the US. So I'm going to pick up Heather, lots of regulars here, Hetty's here, Bob, Innocent Broad's here, Dennis is here, loads and loads of regulars. So Heather was asking the question, do you think Canada is right to fear the temporary waiver to the Passenger Vessel Services Act might become permanent and cruise lines will skip Canada indefinitely? Now, for those of you who don't know the background, there's the British Columbia leadership basically said, look, the US will never skip this, the requirement on the Passenger Vessel Services Act. It'll never happen. When it passed the Senate, they said, oh, well, it won't get through the Senate. Basically, if the Senate passed it and so on. Now, a lot of people in British Columbia are concerned because it's something like 2 or 3 billion Canadian dollars of businesses generated because so many of those Alaska cruises particularly go out of Vancouver. They also call on places like Victoria. Now, to Heather's point, is a lot of people in British Columbia I've seen are very concerned that actually the US will shift to lift that requirement. At this point in time, certainly there's no one in the upper house or lower house, or wherever you define it, that's lobbying for that. Even the Alaska representatives who pushed this bill weren't lobbying for it. So, but as we've learned, I guess, through this whole period, anything's possible. But it doesn't seem there's a lot of enthusiasm generally to make this a permanent and ongoing change. But I guess I was wrong predicting that the first thing wouldn't get through. But I haven't seen any discussion around that, but clearly something to watch out for, because it would also make, in some ways, as a traveler, it's quite appealing because you might get to see a little bit more of Alaska or do a bit more cruising because you can drop one of those ports, etc. Obviously, it's much easier for US people because you don't have all the hassle. One of the hassles of going to Alaska out of Vancouver, I found, was you obviously have to go through the immigration and all that stuff. And it was quite time consuming because you have to go through Canadian and then you have to go through US immigration. Obviously, taking that out of the loop is going to make the whole process much easier. So passengers might quite like that whole approach. Now, sorry, I didn't ask the questions. I didn't answer the second part of Travis's. No, it was not Travis's. It was a question about explaining the way that cruise is working and which cruise line did I recommend for Alaska. What I would say is a lot of this is obviously going to depend on what your particular preference is for any type of, what you like your onboard experience to be. What I would say with Alaska, the two lines that I tend to gravitate when I look at Alaska is Holland America and Princess. And the reason I do that is those are the two cruise lines that have the longest history of being in Alaska. I think I'm right in saying that Holland America have effectively been there like 70 plus years or 75 years because they bought an original company that started up there. Some people dispute if it's quite that long, but it's around about that time. Princess, I think, was it last year, the year before, whenever. I think they're talking about being in Alaska for 50 years. Both of those also own lodges, so you can do some very nice combined, in days when they're doing those kind of trips, you can combine a land portion with it. But those two cruise lines have a very, very long established relationship with Alaska. What I've tended to find with those cruise lines is in the ports, because they do get very busy, they will often get the prime spots in terms of the closest walk into town. So that's something to think about. But they just have so much experience. So I've done Holland America, I've done Princess, but of course it depends, if you like the more Royal Caribbean approach, or you like the freestyle approach of Norwegian, so you like that more, perhaps want a more youthful, vibrant thing. Royal Caribbean Celebrity, of course, is very contemporary and still classical. So I think a lot of it depends on what you're really looking for overall cruise experience. But certainly, if I was choosing, I would focus on those two really to start with. So let me see. I'm just keeping an eye on both of looking at my iPad because someone gets more questions there. So Dennis is asking a really interesting question. I thought when I saw this one pop up, with so many older / smaller ships disposed of, do you think there will be a lack of diverse itineraries since the new big ships can't get into smaller ports? Dennis, it's an interesting point because I hadn't really thought about that actively. But one of the things, of course, some of those smaller ships have gone to other lines. Now, not all of them. We know some of them end up in the beach in Turkey and wherever, being chopped up. But things like Fred Olsen bought 2 of the Holland America ships, so they haven't all disappeared. What we're seeing, though, you're right, is on those big lines like Royal, Norwegian, even now we're seeing with Holland America, Celebrity, they're all moving into the bigger and bigger ships. And you're right, there is potentially a challenge on those itineraries. If one is interested in those more unusual itineraries, which I'm one of those people, which I'm guessing you might as well be, Dennis, is there are still quite a few smaller cruise lines, smaller by I mean smaller ships. Now, some of them obviously the premium ones, you're talking your Silver Seas, Regent Seven Seas, so that's an expensive way to go. And I know there's a question someone's asked about that a little bit later, which I'll come back to. But there's things like Oceania, there's things like Azamara, there's things like Windstar. So those 3 lines I like to look at, because if you are looking for a slightly more unusual itinerary in any of those places, they are definitely ones to look at. So for example, I wanted to do the Panama Canal again. I think we spoke about Panama Canal last week or the week before. And I'm focusing, I booked to go with Oceania because they're calling, not only are they going to do the full transit, which is great, but they're also, which of course you can get on a bigger ship as well, but they're also then, once they come out before they head to Miami, they're going to not just the obvious Costa Maya and Cozumel, which they do go to, but they're going to some of the slightly more unusual smaller ports. So there are still those options to go to. So I think we will see some correcting of that, and there's obviously an opportunity for the smaller lines, but it's definitely I think could be definitely could be one to watch. I want to talk. Let me just go back and make sure that I haven't missed questions. Some really great questions. What's great about these live streams? If you go back to the earlier one, I think this is now number 27. A lot of the questions were around startup, will they, won't start up. And it's so exciting to be able to talk about actual cruises happening and things people are looking for. And it's really exciting to see that. And I've also seen that, actually interesting as an aside, on the channel. It's really exciting because I'm seeing people back looking at things around packing, planning, choosing cabins. It's just so exciting. And of course, it's exciting with all these cruises going. So here we go. Paul, that was your question. Where will Celebrity Summit ship be positioned in summer? So they are going to be the ship Paul, that they are using for their Alaska cruises. So that's where they're going to be. So Jason is asking a question, and now Jason's a solo traveler traveling on P&O in September. What do you think the rules will be on social distancing then? So I just said we're going to get lots of these questions, but of course these are still very, very valid. So basically by September, the chances of there being strict rules is fading rapidly. So at the moment, for all of these cruises that are taking place, because I'm guessing you're selling out of the UK, because I think they have restarted some of their, due to start some of their selling fly cruise ones by September. But where we are currently with the rules is the rules on board the ships are very strict up until the 21st of June. So we're seeing, for example, if you look at all the stuff that's happening on MSC Virtuosa, they're only allowed 1,000 passengers or 50%. They all have to wear masks unless when they're seated. You can't have dinner with people that you're not connected with in your booking. So although there's lots of people who know each other on the ship, there's loads of vloggers and bloggers on board, they can't sit and have dinner with each other because their bookings aren't connected. They did go on an excursion today, but again, it's a bus, it's only half capacity. They have to stay in a bubble. They're not allowed to leave that bubble when they're on the excursion, for example. So all those kind of things, and the testing and whatnot. Now, the plan, what you're finding though, Jason, is most of the ships, including P&O, both Britannia and Iona, are only selling after the 21st of June. So I'm on Britannia on I think it's the beginning of July, one of their first sailings. I mentioned the Saga one first. Now, on those sailings, they have not yet confirmed what the final requirements will be, because it all hinges on what the government's ruling is from the 21st of June. As you probably know, from the 21st of June, the plan in the UK is to lift all of the requirements. So social distancing, mask wearing might move to suggested rather than required. Now, it depends on what happens with the Indian variant. The capacity limits will no longer be in place. So most of those ships that are sailing after the 21st of June, which is why most of them waited for that, they're able to sail with greater than 50% capacity. Now, they aren't all sailing with 50% capacity. Like Saga, for example, I think it's about 80 or 90%. And the other ships, they're still having slightly less capacity. So by September, though, I think it's extremely likely that we won't have those restrictions. For example, all the cruises that are being sold from September are the old cruises that were there. So, for example, I'm due to go in September on Cunard Queen Victoria to Norway, and that's running at the moment as a normal cruise. So there might still be, testing, or there might be a few bits and bobs, but I think we'll see a lot of those social distancing things have gone. So a long way of answering your question. Of course, no one knows the final answer, but I think it's looking extremely, extremely, extremely positive from that perspective. So let's have a look. Bob's asking, do you think we've seen the last of cruise lines cancelling for non-CDC alternative itineraries, STM, BDA? But I'm not 100% sure I know what STM and BDA is. So maybe I'll come back to that one, because I guess what you're saying is when you say non-CDC alternative itineraries, I guess what you mean is the ones that are not new cruises that are being created working around the rules. But I'm not quite sure I understand what that is. So maybe, Bob, you can drop a little question, and then you might already clarify that, and I'll come back to that. Andy Cruz, look forward to your Q&A session. We managed to listen to live for the second time instead of catch up with a glass of wine. Fantastic, good that you're live. I have my very decadent Rooibos tea, which is not even vaguely decadent. Someone actually asked before it started, what does Rooibos tea taste like? And someone wrote a comment at the beginning, it tastes a bit woody, which is probably true, because it is literally, Rooibos means red bush. So in some countries, like in the UK, a lot of brands market as red bush. So, because it's a bush, it's like a little thorny bush. Matt's here from Royal Caribbean Blog. Thanks for joining, Matt. Royal Caribbean Blog is one of the biggest, I think it's the fourth biggest, or maybe the fifth biggest, I can't remember, a YouTube channel in terms of subscribers, and that runs at least once a week, maybe even more, I'm trying to think now, live streams like this, obviously particularly focusing on Royal Caribbean. So if you have any Royal Caribbean questions, definitely follow Royal Caribbean blog, both follow the YouTube channel, but also follow on Twitter, very, very active, particularly if you're interested in latest updates on news, etc. I get a lot of my news from that, breaking kind of US news. Paul's here again, which is fantastic. Andy and Kirsty here. I think Andy and Kirsty and me are probably about the only sort of bloggery types not on Virtuoso at the moment. Strange. Person asking exactly, is Emma's cruise the first one leaving the UK? So that was the MSC Virtuoso. That was the very first cruise that has been sailing. So you're absolutely right. That's the one. Gary saying, enjoy your trips. So Patricia asking, when do you think Queen Mary 2 will release Transatlantic? June 2023. Love your box. Patricia, what normally happens with Cunard, which they sort of stick to, is they normally tend to release the next year's Transatlantics around about as we sort of head into just past summer. So I would expect them to be doing it in a couple of months' time. Now, some of the timing of all this stuff has got a little bit thrown around because some of the cruise lines have been releasing stuff earlier or later, particularly when as things got cancelled. But you normally find they will normally do a big because they really focus all their marketing obviously on the world voyage part, and then as that sort of towards the end of summer, I guess, in the run up to as the one season starts ending, they start pushing that again. So I would say it's probably a couple of months, but it can chop and change. And Matt, of course, like everyone's saying, can't wait for the Alaska cruise to start. And will you be on the Ovation or the Serenade? I guessed. CJ Webster, I love it when people binge watch my videos. Thank you very much. On Adventure of the Seas in July. CJ, one of the things, if you want to also, it's great that you're binge watching these, fantastic. You might want to also, as I said, watch Matt's Royal Caribbean blog. The other blog which I came across today, vlog, should I say, that came across today, came up in my YouTube recommendations, is one of the entertainers, and I'll put a link to this. Let me make a note here. Entertainer vlog is one of the entertainers. Sorry, I realized my thing was moving when I wrote that. One of the entertainment team, she has got a vlog, and she's just had rejoined Adventure of the Seas. She had done a vlog which I think she posted about a week and a half ago, so she'll almost be finished, where she's posting her journey of reboarding the ship, staying in quarantining, and then basically signing on as the ship gets ready for those sailings. So CJ, you might want to take a look at that as well, because it'll also be another way of getting excited about your trip. It was really interesting, just her process of how she's occupying herself in that 2 weeks, because as you know, crew go on board and they have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So that's another one to watch that'll hopefully be very, very timely for your particular cruise. Barry asking, love your channel, which is great. Got lots of people saying very kind things, which is fantastic. Do you think cruises will resume to Hawaii without having to call it Ensenada following the suspension of the Passenger Service Act, or was it specific to Alaska? Now, my understanding was the act is very specifically related to the Alaska leg. So that was my understanding of it, and I will double check that. But my understanding is it's very specific. It was that the act that was brought in place was sponsored specifically by Alaska. And I guess one of the reasons they did that is it made it a much easier argument to get through because it was very specific. Alaska, such a big part of the economy is tourism and cruise related, so it was a very easy argument to make. I guess once they start linking it to other things, it would be more difficult. But my understanding is it's absolutely that. So Linda asked a question about Alaska. 13-day Alaska cruise for late August was cancelled by Oceania. We don't know why. Do you have any thoughts? We love your presentation. Wish you good health and continue good work. Now, I think that's probably linked to Oceania have done a rejig of some of their itineraries. So they were looking to, like many people, run some stuff out of Greece. So I think you'll probably find, I don't know which ship you're on specifically, but if you take a look, you'll probably find that they were one of the ships that they're deploying into Greece to take advantage of opening up. I guess with all the uncertainty of Alaska at the time, all the uncertainty of of having to go through the CDC process, because the Oceania ships were not in the CDC process. Under the whole pathway to resuming cruising, ships have to go through a whole series of phases, and one of the phases requires going through getting all your crew, various testing facilities, and all that kind of stuff on board. And Oceania, when I last looked, didn't have any of their ships in that process. They then saw the advantage, like many cruise lines have done, sailing out of Greece, and they have redeployed some of the ships there. So I suspect that is why you'll find that they're selling other cruises. Rob is asking, any news on Valiant Lady? This is Virgin Voyage's second ship. Valiant Lady, the third ship, is currently being built. They've not released much news on her. We have a cruise booked on her November 20th. But Rob, the good news is that the Valiant Lady is on track. It's completely on track with timing and everything. It's still due to come into service. I'm trying to remember exactly when it's coming in to service. I know I've actually booked on Valiant Lady in January, so it's coming into service at some point before the end of the year. I want to say November, but I can't remember entirely if that's true, because originally I was booked on Valiant Lady in the summer, in July or August, I think it was, and then when they shuffled everything around and changed everything, but you should. So I think you should find you should be perfectly fine for November. They haven't said anything about cancelling it. As you know, they've got Scarlet Lady. They did cancel through until September, I think it is now, and they're going in the UK. I'm going on Scarlet Lady in November, on August the 9th to the 13th on a four-nighter with them, which is the second one they're doing, and they're running through until September, when they're then heading back to the Caribbean. So certainly all the stuff I've seen on Valiant Lady, all the stuff I've seen Virgin posting, including some of the Virgin sales team that I follow, it looks like it's all on track. I think I'm right saying this on its sea trials and stuff. So I think it's pretty good. I guess they're just so focused at the moment on the Scarlet Lady thing. And definitely they've been bringing lots of people back. So some of the contacts that I know who worked on the social media side and stuff that I knew from various things, she's back working full time again, and so they're clearly gearing up. So that's pretty good. Now, Nancy, this is another really interesting question with very mixed signals at the moment. So, do you think cruise lines will charge markedly higher prices to make up for lost revenue? I haven't priced cruises the past month, so maybe it's already happening. Nancy, there is very mixed kind of signals, and it's hard to really look at. I think what the answer to that is probably we will see as people head back and as cruises come on. I think we will see some sort of upward pressure. However, I've gone a little bit crazy. I was looking today. I've actually got, between now and the end of next year, 17 cruises booked. I've kind of gone a little bit crazy. And that's a combination of cruises that have moved. Obviously, these new UK cruises I'm doing a lot. And when I look at the pricing across that, the pricing that I'm seeing is still pretty much pricing that I had from 2019, because all of those cruises have been moved from 2020 into 2021, some of them to 2022. And those prices are still largely the same, with one big exception, which I'll talk about in a second. But what I've seen with those is I've managed to lock in deals where the fare is largely the same, but I've managed to then get a whole bunch of extras. So often gratuities, drinks package, Wi-Fi, and those kind of things bundled in. Or I'm seeing onboard credit kind of offers, but it tends to be more of those things which are added. So actually, in some ways, although I'm paying the same, the value has kind of improved. Now, it's hard to know now as we see cruises coming back on, like the Alaska. It's going to be interesting to see where those prices settle down on, because there is still only 6, 7, 8 ships, and presumably lots of people wanted to go, so there could be some pressure there. I have also seen, though, some indications that some of the return to cruises, there is some, like I've noticed a couple of the UK summer cruises, there are promotions on those happening, which suggests, you know, there's some pricing. I think what we might see though is when we get on board, that's what I don't know yet. I suspect we will see some inflation on board, because big chunk of the profits that cruise lines make as their business model is on board. And that's where I think it's going to be interesting once we get back sailing, because that is where, you know, if you look at the whole cruise business model, the business model is to sail as full as possible, which may be limited for a period of time, and then make money on board. So things like Cruise Market Watch, which tracks this, says on average, people will spend 50% to 100% of their cruise fare once they get on board. So Wi-Fi, gratuities, drinks, excursions, and so on. And that's very high margin stuff. So that I think is going to be the real key. So in all the trackers, and one of the Cruise Market Watch is a site that I look at a lot, they track a lot of stuff. They haven't picked up prices shifting. What the cruise lines have said in their various financial reporting, they have spoken about trying to basically get prices at 2019 kind of levels. So it's sort of a roundabout way of asking. I don't think we're seeing markedly high prices with, as I said, that one exception, and that's Celebrity. Celebrity prices, my Celebrity cruises, I think, well, I've got two actually. I've got a UK one and then one next year. The prices increased fairly significantly because they shifted to, and I've forgotten what Celebrity called it, they've shifted to a fare which includes like an all-inclusive fare. So you have like drinks and Wi-Fi and all that stuff included. And the prices there shifted quite a lot. We've also seen, for example, Honda America, you can now, because they sort of match what Celebrity have done, they now have their, I've forgotten what it's called, is it all in or something? But effectively that's like $19 extra a day, bundling all that stuff in. So you may not end up spending as much, like, if you know what I mean, but the actual headline fare has grown on Celebrity, but actually I suspect I'll still end up spending about the same as I would have spent. Good point. I guess there's been probably a question around the vaccination thing, which is very important. You're right. Thomas is making the point that technically it's both doses. So all of these cruise lines have said that when they talk about vaccinated, you have to have had, if it's a 2-dose one, if it's not the Johnson & Johnson 1 dose, 2 weeks you have to be fully vaccinated. So for example, if you take a look at the UK app, so we have on the NHS app, it now has a vaccination certification there. You can also get a hard copy, you can request a hard copy. And that gets triggered after that 2-week period. So that, you know, so it's the 2-week period. Very important, two really important watch outs about as cruises go back. Well, I just want to talk about that because it happened on Virtuosa. They don't have the vaccination part, but also you need to extremely carefully on insurance. So in the UK cruises, as they start up, and I think this is also true of the Greek cruises, and I'm not 100% sure because I haven't seen it yet for the US cruises, but absolutely check what the requirement is on insurance. So in the UK cruises, you have to have 3 components to your travel insurance. Well, first of all, you have to have travel insurance before you can board, and you have to show proof of it before you board, whereas before you just entered in when you you checked in and online and no one ever checked. You have to physically show proof of your insurance. Secondly, it has to specifically be cruise insurance. So for example, my previous insurer, which I had travel insurance with, they covered cruises, but it wasn't cruise specific, but they covered it. But it has to be cruise specifically. It has to have COVID cover for medical expenses for COVID cover, and it has to be to a certain amount. It's £2.5 million, which is $3 million. Really, really important. So a bunch of people, including rather embarrassedly for them, a travel writer went to MSC Virtuosa, handed over the insurance, and MSC said, we can't let you board with that insurance because it's not as per required. Now, they had the choice of buying insurance. What MSC had rather cleverly done is they had an insurance company there that was then selling insurance to people that met the needs. So it's very important. So Thomas, thanks for that point. Carly is saying, wow, we've received confirmation by Princess of August Alaska cruise. That's fantastic. So you must have been sailing out of Seattle. Anyway, that's really, really fantastic. Sonia, this is an interesting one as well in terms of protocols. Are they still going to require COVID tests for vaccinated guests, since the CDC says this is not necessary? Now, two elements to that, because it depends a little bit on region. Now, you're obviously talking about the US. Let me talk about the UK, and then I'll talk about Greece, and then I'll talk about the US, because those are three places where cruising is starting up. In the UK at this point in time, the testing is still required before boarding, even for vaccinated guests. It's the fast antigen test, which actually in the UK we get sent to our homes, and we're asked to do it maybe twice a week at the moment. Not everyone does that, but that's what we're being asked to do. So that's a fast test. You get results 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour or something. And so that is still required because that's part of the protocols. Now, what we haven't seen is the final rules out of the CDC. Now, what the CDC did say, though, to your point, was that they were not going to require vaccinated guests, if it was a fully vaccinated cruise, or in fact a vaccinated guest, to have to be tested before or on disembarkation, because in original CDC rules, you had to be tested before and you had to be tested afterwards. Now, the cruise lines still have the testing capability on board because that was part of the rules. They have to have it available, so if anything blows up. What we haven't seen, though, is are the cruise lines going to do the testing, even though they may not be required to do it. So certainly I think the view that we're seeing on cruises out of the UK, and we're also seeing that of Greece, is they are keeping, certainly at this point in time, they're keeping the testing as part of the requirements. However, what I have seen is the cruise lines saying, particularly after these startup cruises, is they will wait for further guidance. So the cruise lines may still do it. And what I've noticed when I looked at, Princess, Celebrity, and Holland America, etc., and Carnival, under their frequently asked questions around protocols for those Alaska cruises, they basically said for a lot of them, like masks and testing and stuff, they said pending. We will let you know. It's kind of pending. So it's not going to be required, but it could be a thing. Thomas asking a question. Do you know if the cruise lines that allow cruises with vaccinated passengers will also require mask wearing all the time? So Thomas, at the moment, certainly in the UK cruises, it is required at this point in time. Now that may change again if the government advice changes, but certainly at the moment in the protocols for all the vaccinated cruises that are starting up in Greece and are starting up in the UK, which offer vaccinated passengers, they are requiring masks because it's still part of the overall guidelines. Unlike the US, because the US has got this, which from the outside looks a little bit confusing, is they've said if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. If you aren't, you should, kind of thing. Whereas what we're seeing in Europe is it's a blanket thing, whether you're vaccinated or not, which I guess just helps them monitor it more. So certainly they're keeping it at the moment. However, as I was saying in the previous question, is the cruise lines are saying it is still to be confirmed. And I think I was looking at Carnivals this morning. Again, Carnival, specifically that question says, we'll let you know if that's going to happen. So I think we're likely to see that evolve based on what happens on land. I get a sense that in the UK, for example, I think the mask advice is going to be, we advise you to wear it, but it's not going to be a requirement. And I suspect we'll see the cruise lines move that way as well. So Ian asking the question around vaccinations. What's the impact of destinations requiring vaccinations? MSC has just cancelled their trips to Iceland, or the other lines can sell there because they require guests to be vaccinated. Ian, I guess you're asking around destinations requiring people to be vaccinated before they can come in. I'm not sure why MSC cancelled their ones. I can't answer that properly, but certainly what we're seeing in Europe, let's talk about Europe, is what the EU have said is that as they open up, they are lifting a number of requirements with people who are vaccinated. So you can, if you are vaccinated and you show proof of vaccination, they're lifting some of the testing requirements, and they're lifting some of the quarantining requirements. So that's in the EU, and they've just agreed that as an entirety. At the same time that they've agreed that they're going to open up to third countries like the US and people with vaccinations won't have to do the quarantining. although some countries in the EU are saying people from the UK can go in if they're vaccinated without any quarantining, some are saying that you can go in either way. So it's a bit confusing. And Germany just today are talking about stopping people from the UK going in because of the concerns around the Indian variant. So it's a little bit of a mess. But in terms of answering your question, is what we're seeing is countries are definitely lifting requirements for vaccinated passengers to quarantining. The exception at the moment being the UK. So the UK makes no distinction at the moment. So if you're coming into the UK eventually to catch a cruise, which would have to be after September, you would still have to do the quarantining if you were vaccinated. That may evolve. So what we're seeing, though, is it's more around destinations lifting requirements for quarantining, which of course makes it possible for cruising because then they can do the various port calls. Let's have a look. Anton Andy asking, there are a lot of companies selling out of the UK versus normal. Is it likely to continue for the future, allowing for a lot more competition with maybe more competitive prices? And Andy, you're right. There's a lot of lines selling out of the UK, although it's not actually more than normal, surprisingly enough. In fact, some of the lines that sometimes sell out of the UK are probably not selling out of the UK as much. So like Norwegian might call into the UK, they're not planning to call into the UK this year. So there are increasingly large amounts of cruise lines selling. And I think you're right, though, is as more and more get drawn to the UK, obviously the UK cruising is growing, but it should have a positive effect on pricing. So for example, MSC, which are selling now, as we know, with Virtuosa, had not had a ship based in the UK for a very long time, but they had already committed to putting ships back into the UK. So the number of lines that we're seeing has not actually increased as significantly as it would seem on total, because, you know, you've got Virgin sailing, which weren't sailing, but then you've got Norwegian that would have a ship coming in, but it's not coming in. So it's sort of the same. But I think we will see definitely the UK, attracting more and more lines. I guess one of the things I get asked a lot is Holland America, for example, don't have any ships selling out of the UK. They tend to sell out of things like Amsterdam or Rotterdam, but Princess have ships based out of the UK. Certainly, whenever I've been to presentations by the different cruise companies, the UK is becoming more and more a port of interest to them. So I think we will see more, and hopefully, I think we will see a positive pressure on pricing, because also we're seeing bigger and bigger ships coming. So obviously we've got P&O with Iona. You know, there's a massive ship. All the new P&O ships have been huge. MSC are talking about putting big ships in. The Royal Caribbean are putting bigger ships in. So hopefully that would be the case. Irish in the USA, good to see you. Any recommendations for hotels to stay close to the cruise port in New York City? I don't have a good recommendation because it depends which one you're sailing from. So when I've sailed out of New York, I've only ever sailed out of Brooklyn, and I know other people have sailed out of New Jersey side. So that's where a lot of the ships end up going. So I ended up staying just in New York and going across to Brooklyn rather than staying in Brooklyn. So I don't have any recommendations. Lots of hotels I've stayed in New York. So I used to work half the month for about 5 years in New York. So I've stayed in loads of hotels around there, but I don't have any that are close specifically. And Manhattan's not that big, so I wouldn't be too fussed about it. But if anyone does have any really good recommendations, maybe you can pop that in there, would be good. RRest11, I hope I've got that correct. Is river cruising from Basel to Nuremberg at the end of October / early November bad time? What about adding the land package to Zurich and Lucerne at the period? I've done a couple of river cruises at that time of the year, and it can be a little bit unpredictable because it can be quite cold. It can be a little bit gray. So I've done maybe 2 cruises now. I did one on Ammer Waterway, and I've done one on Avalon. Both were October into November time. And one of the things I remember that is, in terms of making videos for the channel, is the problem is that it was quite gray. So the actual cruise itself was fantastic. You know, the ship was fantastic. It was the good thing about going to visit the places is they weren't as busy as they would be in the summer, but it was a little bit cold. It was a little bit gray. So from that perspective, you know, it's not incredible sunny weather guaranteed, particularly in that part of the world. You know, if you were doing an ocean cruise in Greece or something, or going down the down Dubrovnik way, it's fantastic weather because it's about 20 degrees. So certainly it's a little bit from the grey side, but it's still a great cruise because places aren't as busy. So the attractions and sites you're going to are not as busy. I would always add a land package on to those parts. So I would try and add a land package on. It's always great to extend the river cruise. River cruises are quite full on. And if you really take advantage of a river cruise, so you're doing all the built-in excursions and stuff, you end up, it's a vacation, but it's not a completely restful vacation because there's so much to do. It's a pretty jam-packed itinerary. So having a land-based package is also quite nice to chill out a little bit more and sort of chill around a bit more. Oh, here we go. Hetty said it. Thanks, Hetty. You're right. The Adventure of the Seas blogger is Jordan Barth. She's a professional ice skater. She was on the lure for her first contract gravities. So thanks, Hetty. So yes, I'll put a link in there. But she is you can tell she's like an athlete. She is so like fit, and she's like, and she spends a huge amounts of time working out. You can see why. But very interesting, very nicely put together. So that'll be great, for keeping getting kind of buzzed on that. Heather's asking, what time of the year do you recommend for a transatlantic crossing on Queen Mary 2? We don't like being hot, and we aren't bothered by rough seas. Also, which direction do you prefer, and is a balcony pointless? Great. So, as anybody knows, I absolutely love the transatlantics on Queen Mary 2, and I've done them at various times of the year, and they've all been great. However, if you are not bothered by rough seas, a winter crossing is quite an event. They do winter crossings, so they'll cross. Normally, what they do is they'll cross earlier December, and they'll sometimes do a Caribbean or something. They'll come back and they'll do a crossing around about the 15th. This is from Southampton to New York on the 15th of December to be in New York for the 20-something. They then do their 12th night or whatever it is, Caribbean every single year. And then they do a crossing back. They get back to the UK around the 6th to the 10th of January, and then they begin the world voyage. Now, those two crossings, the seas can be very rough. So when you say you don't like rough seas, bear in mind this could be very rough. You could be talking about 50-foot waves, 60-foot waves. The ship, it moves around a lot, but obviously it's designed for that. So if you genuinely like it, it's an amazing experience at that part of time. I really, really love it. My partner gets incredibly seasick, but still likes doing them, has the jab, and then sleeps for 8 hours, and then it's fine. So, but it is an amazing experience. But if you want, a fantastic time to do it, I like doing it sort of April, May time. It's the beginning of the season. So sometimes it only, depending on when the World Cruise ends, often ends up only being in May. So most of them we've done, I think 2 or 3 winter ones, and the other ones we've done mostly that May time. So this May we're doing the one which has been postponed now 3 times. And the May is, the seas can be kind of rough, but we've also been once when it was absolutely beautiful and just smooth seas. And then you've got the end of the season, which is sort of September time. And the reason for doing those, why I recommend those, is they're shoulder season or cheaper. So they're actually slightly cheaper than doing, if you do the sort of July, August time, which is when it's warmest, probably the chance of smoother seas, but you can't really predict that with the Atlantic. But it's much more expensive. So if you don't mind that, I would go that time. In terms of weather, to be honest with you, whichever time of the year you do, you're not going to start out sunbathing in the Atlantic because you're kind of going North Atlantic. So it's not actually that hot because you're sailing, you're out in the ocean, there's winds. So I've never been hot, sweltering hot on a transatlantic. Maybe in August it might get so. Now, in terms of the balcony, I think the balcony is phenomenal, but I'm sort of biased anyway, because you're sailing through the ocean. It's just wonderful having the balcony, sitting on the balcony, just watching it all go by. Of course, it's more expensive doing it as a balcony. The important thing, though, with Queen Mary 2 is to decide what sort of grade you want. Queen Mary 2 is, all the Cunard ships, is a class-based ship, if you like. So you've got Britannia Grill with that beautiful big Art Deco-y style dining room, which is Britannia. So that's your inside, your ocean views, and your balcony cabins each in there. Then you've got a Britannia Club, which is sort of, I would call it like premium economy kind of thing, which has open seated dining. So Britannia, you either have an early seated or a late seated dining. Britannia Club is more open seated dining. Then you have Princess Grill, which is the equivalent of traveling like club class, which you have, tend to be a little bit higher up on the ship, slightly bigger cabins. You can Princess Grill. Then you have Queen's Grill, which is sort of like first class, and you there have up to those big 2-level magnificent suites through like a Q6, which is a kind of, it's effectively the size of 2 balcony cabins together. Queen's Grill is an amazing experience. Princess Grill is an amazing experience, but it is pretty hefty cost-wise. But it is an amazing experience because those you have your own table, but it's open-seated dining, so you can go whatever time you like, but you still have the same serving crew. So there's also that decision to make. You can go, I sort of joke, you can go across the Atlantic on Queen Mary 2 for something like $35,000 per person in a Q1 suite, the Queen Mary suite or whatever. But you can also cross for probably about $700, $1,000 per person in an inside cabin. So there's a vast variety and also very different kind of experience just in terms of the whole dining experience. So in terms of direction, now, my favorite direction is actually to go from Southampton to New York. Now, people often disagree with me on this point, but basically, obviously the time difference is the same because it's a 5-hour time difference. However, when you're going from Southampton to New York, because you're putting the clock back, because New York's obviously 5 hours behind, is you effectively have a 25-hour day for 5 of the 7 days. So you effectively have an extra hour. So if you go to bed, when you're going to bed, or at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or whatever, depends on how late night, you're effectively going to bed an hour earlier, if you know what I mean. So you're having a longer day theoretically. If you go the other way, what happens is you lose an hour every day. Now, what they used to do when you're heading from New York to Southampton is they used to do the hour at night, and they changed it to lunchtime because they actually was much less disruptive for the crew and also for passengers. But effectively, you've got a shorter day. You've got 23-hour days, effectively. Now, of course, in reality, it's the same time difference. It's just the way the clock and stuff works. So I actually really like going from Southampton to New York, but partly that's living in the UK. It's quite nice to then, get off, spend some time in New York, or before we go to Washington. When we go to the one in May, we're actually going to go from New York, go to Las Vegas, because I've been to Las Vegas for ages, and I used to go there like every year if I could. So for us, it's the chance to travel. So what you might want to do, Heather, is coming from North America, is actually do that way, because then you do your travel before. Downside of that is you're then flying home afterwards. So I like going Southampton to New York, and I would say most of the ones we've done have been that way. And the one we're doing in May is that way. So I would always tend to choose that one. So I've gone on that for quite a long time now, but hopefully that's answered your questions. I have a video about the transatlantics, which I know is very popular and people like it. I'm just not as happy with it because I think the quality of the video I've gotten is not great. But I do have a video on that, Heather, you might want to check out. And I was so excited about going originally in 2020 to actually do new footage and do a new updated video. Andy and Kirsty, we really fancy trying Saga now. We fall into the quiet age category. Should we go for it? It's quite expensive. Andy and Kirsty, it's a really interesting one, Saga. You're right. I mean, I was pretty skeptical, like you are, about Saga. And the problem is, I always just see Saga because, for those who don't know, Saga, you have to be 50 years or older before you can go on it. If you're 50 years old, but your partner is over 40, they could come with you. You could have a travel companion overwards, but you have to be 50. So the risk is, of course, it's always had an image of then having people in their 70s and 80s and stuff. So it's always been seen as quite a sort of an elderly kind of experience. However, Saga have changed a lot, or certainly when I went on board, my experience was very, very different. Their new ships, the Spirit of Discovery, which I've been on just for a short 4-nighter, and I'm going on, it's on a 6-nighter, the first cruise I'm going on when we go back from the 27th of June. It's a beautiful ship. It's very contemporary. It's got amazing restaurants. It's a beautiful lab. The cabins are really beautiful. And you're right, it is expensive. It's expensive because quite a lot is bundled in. It's a small ship, only 999 passengers, all balcony or above cabins. They have 20% of solo cabins, so a lot of solo travelers on board, and you can get a solo cabin from of course, you won't need a solar cabin, but you get a solar cabin from a balcony up to a suite, for example. So that's kind of interesting. So I would definitely try Saga. You know, they have a partnership with Jules Holland on Spirit of Discovery. For those you don't know, he's quite a well-known musician. So they have the club there has artists that he's curated. They have a really nice Asian fusion restaurant, like a seafood restaurant. So it is great. I mean, the average age on board is probably older. It probably is 70. I don't know. It depends a little bit on the cruise. I'm very, very excited about my Saga cruise, which, you know, years ago when I sent my parents on a Saga cruise, I sent them on because I thought it was an old fuddy-duddy thing to do and they'd like it. Whereas now I'm 62 and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm actually thinking of making a video around this perception and reality thing when I'm on it. So I would definitely do it. But you're right, it is quite expensive because it is a premium cruise line. It is definitely. But I would definitely give it a go. And as I said, I'm going to be on it in 27th of June. I'll be doing some videos around it. I do actually have a video on the channel, and maybe I'll add that as well in the link, of Spirit of Discovery, and you get a sense of what the ship is. That's Bob making the point again about you get that the extra hours on that crossing. So Amy, do you know if MSC has two different protocols for vaccinated and unvaccinated passengers on the same cruise? No, they don't. They don't distinguish between vaccinated and unvaccinated. Everybody, whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated, have to arrive at the port with a negative test, which can either be a PCR test or you can use the one that NHS provides, the antigen test, which you then have to submit your results. No difference in protocols at all. It's exactly the same protocols for vaccinated and unvaccinated. They don't even know, because I was wondering this today, if they have actually checking how many people are actually vaccinated, what percentage of people, but they don't seem to be doing that. Maybe they are. So, but no is the short answer. Here we are, Steve. Thanks to your recognition of Gary Pluck. Fantastic. I heard that people have been in contact with him. Pulled the trigger, set to go to Greece on Apex. Fantastic. I'm very envious. Celebrity Apex I was supposed to be doing this year, and of course all got changed, and I didn't do it, and my schedule's full. I'm not doing it. So really interested to see what you think about Apex. I'm doing Apex. No, I'm not doing Apex next year. I'm doing Edge because Apex was going to be somewhere else. So great to hear that Gary worked out. Gary is who's with Red Travel, and he's the agent that I sometimes recommend if people are looking for someone in the US. So great to hear that that you found that handy. Randy, when do you think Australia will open up? We're on a part of the Queen Mary 2 World Tour in February 2022. What might Cunard do if Australia is still closed? Thanks for all your info. Right. So Randy, this is like the $64,000 question. It's really hard to know what's happening in Australia. What I have seen, in fact, we were talking to our friends in Australia who were hoping to come in October. They were hoping to come at Christmas, and now they have no idea when they're going to be able to come. In fact, they're talking about trying to meet their dad who lives in the UK in Singapore if there's some sort of corridor opened after Christmas. Certainly what the Australian government has said is they have no plans of opening the border until into 2022. I did see that Qantas are trying to lobby the government to let them have borders open by Christmas. I think I saw today that the vaccination program is running extremely slowly. They will not have people vaccinated by the end of the year. Obviously, with the way that Australia's been, where they've kind of locked it down, they're not going to let people in until people are vaccinated, because you can just imagine what's going to happen. So I haven't heard what Cunard have said at all. So when will Australia open? We've seen lines like P&O Cruise Australia, they've pushed it right through, I think, to September now. So cruise lines that normally operate out there, there's still no approval to bring ships back into Australia. There seems to be very little enthusiasm to bring ships in. They also have a rule, by the way, in Australia now, which says that even if ships come back, they can only enter, because some smaller ships theoretically are allowed back, but they can only enter, because Pennant was trying to get a ship into Australia, a smaller ship, and they said they would only give visas for people that were essential crews, so engineers, I guess, maybe the bridge crew, but everybody else on the ship, chefs, hotel, bar staff, entertainer, every single other job could only be done by an Australian. So that's another problem. So that's another rule they're having for even letting ships back in. Of course, that may not affect the, a ship like Queen Victoria calling. So I would say, based on what Australia is saying, unless something changes, that leg has to be questionable. Now, I'm only speculating on what I know. And I think we're going to see for the whole world cruise, and someone was asking this last week, is I think as we head into only September time, because final payment is going to be due around then, is we'll see cruise lines coming off the fence on what their new kind of itinerary is going to be to work around that. But certainly the way things look at the moment, Randy, I would say it's looking optimistically like 50-50 for Australia and the borders. There's kind of growing pressure, but a lot of it's linked to their vaccination program. So that's definitely a challenge. Here we are, someone talking about the pricing. Dave, we recently booked our spring 2023 cruise for March 23, pay basically the same as we had for a cruise in 19. So that's good to know, because that's also what I had what I'd been seeing. Eddie talking about, so let's talk about this is a good one around the whole issue of diet and dietary requirements, etc. I can only drink decaf drinks. I only drink decaf drinks as well. Can I take my own coffee grinds on board and get a made to drink? You won't need to do that. They will have decaf on board. I only drink decaf sodas, coffees, all that kind of stuff. So don't worry about that. They are really, really, really absolutely well kind of sorted from that whole perspective. I saw the question around for Saga. Yes, you have to be 50. So 50 or over before you can go on Saga. But if you have a travel companion, they can be over 40. So if you've got a boyfriend, girlfriend, mistress, whatever, whoever you're traveling with, you're over 50, they're over 40, you can go. And I do know people, journalists though, who've been on who are under 40, but I think that was a specific exception. Here we are. I like Patricia. She's my favorite person of the day. You don't look 62 years. I was thinking late 40s or early 50s. So she's my new favorite person of all time. Wow. So I've realized now we've completely hours gone. I hopefully have answered most of your questions. So I realize I've got that. Sorry, I answered that question there. So thanks so much for joining. If you haven't watched the video that went on the channel this week, it was a little bit dramatic there. It was around how I stumbled on the best way to get problems solved on a cruise. So take a look at that if you haven't had a chance to look at that. Have a great rest of the week. Just want to let you know that next week I will be doing the live stream on Sunday, not on Saturday, because I actually can't do Saturday next week, but I'll obviously post all that when we can. So thanks so much for joining. Thanks for all your fantastic questions. And hopefully I'll see you next week on Sunday. Stay well, stay safe, and here's very soon to some great cruising.